he told me that when I was younger. I don't walk around trying to be what I'm not. I don't waste my time trying to get what you got. I work at pleasing me cause I can't please you. And that's
All right,
why
we're gonna get started in just a few seconds. Gonna let a couple more of those numbers trickle in. We'll go over some expectations for our time together in a second. All right, we have hit 100 people. Let's get started. We have over 500 people registered tonight. So we're so excited to be on with you all. Welcome, welcome. Today, we are here to talk about the state of New York's climate law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which the New Yorker News Coalition helped pass in 2019, thanks to the work of so many people on this call. Since 2019, so much has happened to advance the implementation of this law. Tonight, we will talk about where things stand, how we got here, and where we need to go moving forward. We, of course, will inevitably miss some things or not be able to answer all questions that folks have, but we know this work will continue well beyond our time together this evening, and that tonight is, among many things, an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to this collective work. We'll be sharing a lot of links tonight for actions, so be prepared to keep your tabs open. So we're just going to go over some kind of Zoom logistics. Everyone's unfortunately painfully familiar.
Stop it. Come on, you idiots.
As there is an echo right now, that is exactly why we're about to do what we're about to do. Next slide, please. So if folks are either on their phone or on their computer, you see just some basic functionalities of Zoom for muting, turning off your video, seeing the participant list, and going into the chat to, answer some, to make some comments. We'll have folks introduce themselves in a second. So always just a good thing to review so folks have a good sense of how to navigate Zoom. Next slide. So folks know if anyone is in need of this function, there is a closed caption services where it'll articulate what we are verbally saying if you are more of a visible hearer rather than auditory. Just so you know, we are recording tonight. If you are uncomfortable with that, we want to give you the opportunity to put yourself off of view by turning off your camera. And if you have any tech issues tonight, any concerns or questions that come up, you can reach out to our tech support, Ariel Swarnoff, the New Yorker News Coalition. You can contact her at 925-262-3004. So my name is Ryan Madden. I am the sustainability organizer with the Long Island Progressive Coalition. We are an active member of the New Yorker News Coalition and a steering committee. I am calling in today from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, which is the traditional land of the Canarsie and Lenape people. It is important to start today with a land acknowledgement, recognizing that we're all on stolen land and that our ongoing work isn't separate from that, and rooting us in the history and presence of Indigenous peoples here today. So before we dive in, would love to get a sense of who's calling in. So in the chat, if you could please include your name, your pronoun, any affiliation you feel like mentioning, and whose land you're on. And if you're not aware of the land that you are on, Ariel is going to drop a link in the chat that will help you look that up. And as folks are doing that, I am going to pass this off to Amanda Sachs to introduce herself and to provide some background on what the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is and the process that has unfolded since its passage to make the law real. Amanda?
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, all. It's great to be with you. My name is Amanda Sachs. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the climate associate with Environmental Advocates NY. This is just the agenda that we'll go through today, a level setting then New York Renew's bottom lines for CLCPA implementation, a panel discussion on the state of play of the scoping plan, and live actions and next steps. So next slide, please. In case you didn't know, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act sets the strongest emission standards in the country, 85% reductions by 2050 and benchmarks leading up to carbon neutrality. It's also a climate justice law, above all, requiring that at least 35% of the benefits of climate spending go to disadvantaged communities. And due to advocacy, it's really been pushed to 40%. One thing the law does is establish climate and equity screens for all state agencies. This means that climate considerations are built in for long-term planning, and this provides us with a tool to stop fossil fuel infrastructure. And this brings me to two recent victories. A week ago, there was incredible news that these climate and equity screens made it so that DEC denied what would have been two extremely harmful natural gas power plants from being sited in the EJ communities of Astoria and Newburgh. But victories like these really can't be taken for granted. And it was the work of grassroots environmental justice groups on the ground, protesting fossil fuel infrastructure and citing the law that helped create this level of accountability. Could you just go back one slide? Perfect, thank you. The CLCPA has also led to the Williams pipeline being denied and has led to 40% of what New York calls its clean energy funds being allocated to disadvantaged communities. Now the climate law is being cited as a reason to not allow for the permit renewal of the Greenwich power plant in Finger Lakes. And it really takes partnerships and coalitions on the ground, ensuring that New York State follows the landmark climate law to keep these wins going. Next slide, please. So what is the Climate Action Council? Well, the climate law created the Climate Action Council, and this is a body of 22 appointees who develop a scoping plan to meet these mandates of the CLCPA. And of the appointees, we have 2 who are members of New York Renews, an additional 3 who we consider to be close allies, and 2 representatives from the fossil fuel industry. They've been given recommendations for the scoping plan by sector-specific advisory panels like transportation, waste, and land use and local government. And the CAC will have to share a public draft of their scoping plan by January 1st, 2022. And then they'll be holding hearings for public input where we will all be needed in the process. Next slide, please. The disadvantaged communities mentioned are currently being defined by a group called the Climate Justice Working Group. They play an advisory role and have been establishing the criteria so that the right communities are prioritized for pollution reduction, for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, regulatory impact statements, and of course, the actual money, the investments related to the CLCPA. And the Climate Justice Working Group has responded to each of the advisory panels with feedback to ensure that the final recommendations are aligned with the justice and equity provisions of the law, and also that they don't pose burdens to disadvantaged communities. And this feedback has differed in response to the different panels. Some of the advisory panel's recommendations have posed additional health risks to the communities that this law was meant to protect. And some just didn't go far enough or could be tweaked to ensure greater benefits. This is another place where we can come in throughout the process. We can ensure that time and time again that it is clear New Yorkers back the Climate Justice Working Group. And that's all I've got. Now I'm going to pass it to Anthony Rogers-Wright from NILPI to talk about New York Renews' bottom lines for CLCPA implementation.
Hey, Anthony, are you with us? Anthony, are you here? All right, so I know Anthony was just coming in from a flight and getting set up, so he may have gotten disrupted. So I will step in here for the time being until Anthony hopefully can rejoin. One of our first bottom lines, of course, is that there must be a minimum of 40% of all state climate and equity spending going to frontline Black, Brown, and low-income communities. The original language in the law, in the original Climate and Community Protection Act was very clear that we meant investments and spending, and the language that ultimately made in put that into question. And so our bottom line is that the original intent of the law be upheld. Next slide, please. As was mentioned before, we need to make sure that decisions of all state agencies, including the Climate Action Council, must be subject to the climate and equity requirements of the CLCPA. Although we had the tremendous wins with Dan Scammer and Astoria last week, there has been some inconsistency in its application, and so we have to ensure its consistency throughout. We need to uphold that decisions can't increase our emissions or burdens on frontline communities that have already borne the historic pollution of in these communities. And these screens must be included in the scoping plan itself, of course, and apply across government while the plan is being developed. So no wait and see, which again, we're seeing some of, but we need to see it consistently. Next slide.
I think we got Anthony back, actually. Sorry about that.
Okay, Anthony, come take it away from me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and thanks for the kickoff. But in terms of including getting back on track on our bottom lines, we definitely want to identify specific measures in every sector of the economy to rapidly and equitably reduce our emissions, including co-pollutants. It's not just about carbon dioxide, y'all. It's also about the PCBs, the lead, the PM 2.5, PM 10, all of it, and not just byproducts of burning fossil fuels that cause asthma and other health problems. Next slide, please. We're going to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure and generation. As many of y'all know, we had an amazing victory in the last 2 weeks when the Department of Environmental Conservation denied 2 Title V air permits for peaker plants in Newburgh, New York, and in Astoria, Queens. We're going to continue on that momentum as part of our bottom lines, and we're going to articulate that big win that there's no space for new fossil fuel infrastructure and emissions generation in New York State. That is what has been mandated by the DEC's decision to deny those 2 permits, and where you have a robust plan to take existing fossil fuel infrastructure offline and replace it with clean renewable energy sources. Next slide. We refuse to allow ourselves to be fooled by false solutions. Included in the DEC rejection of the recent peaker plants, there was actually a discussion about so-called hydrogen combustion or blue hydrogen, in which the DEC even lifted that up and said that by 2040, any use of hydrogen combustion through renewable natural gas and the use of carbon capture and sequestration does not align, would not be feasible in alignment with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So in so many ways, the work is already being done for us. The people's climate policy is working for them. So instead of these false solutions, we're going to invest in proven renewable regenerative technologies, wind, solar, geothermal, especially offshore wind in places like New York City. Our good, amazing sister organization, Uprose, lifting up offshore wind. We're going to continue on that. We're also going to continue on community solar. Next slide. It's so important that we respect indigenous sovereignty. We all know that we're on stolen land. One of the tenets that come with the just transition and environmental justice includes free, prior, and informed consent for sovereign, indigenous, and tribal nations. We are going to do better as New York Renews and as a larger movement of consulting with and following the leadership of our indigenous sisters, brothers, and family. Native communities are included on the front line of direct impacts. They have a historical relationship to the land. and the government has a sacred trust, a treaty trust with this amazing population, and we're going to make sure that's uplifted as part of any just transition and aligning, of course, with the principles of environmental justice of 1991. Next slide. So we're also calling for any plan that's part of our just transition, strong labor standards for all projects. We're going to organize the wind workers, we're going to organize the solar workers, and we're going to make sure that they have everything from paid family leave to healthcare for their families and family sustaining wages. As we said, a guaranteed just transition, where in the process of them transitioning from polluting economies, we make sure that their healthcare for them and their families is secure, their wages are secure, and that their entitlements are secure. And democratic participation in the plan and development and implementation process following the tenets of energy democracy. Next slide. So with that, I am going to pass it back to my homie, Ryan. I'm going to pass the lacrosse ball back to you, Ryan, to talk about the actions that we have with us. And thanks for bearing with me. I'm excited to be in struggle with y'all. Let's go get it.
Thank you so much, Anthony. As you can see on the screen, we're going to take a quick action. What Ariel is about to drop into the chat, a tool where you can very readily send an email to all members of the Climate Action Council and the governor, upholding these bottom lines that really should be the floor for what any scoping plan includes. And so we're going to give you 1 minute to just use that tool. And then we ask that you come back and just type done in the chat so we know that you have taken that action. It quite literally takes a few seconds and just re-articulates all of the bottom lines that we just communicated. So please take the next 30 seconds or 45 seconds at this point to do that. And we'll give you some music to enjoy. Beautiful. We are seeing a flood of duns, which is the only floods we approve of. Keep them coming. We have 160 people on the call. We should see 160 duns. Amazing. Okay. Give folks another couple seconds. Really appreciate it. And for anyone who is not able to access the chat or the links, we will be sending all of the many dozens, not dozens, but all of the links that we'll be sharing with you tonight will come your way at the end of the day. So the next thing that is going to be dropped into the chat is a social media toolkit, which allows you to share the very tool that you just used yourself. And there's a couple different things on there. So if you have a preferred method of communication in your circles, whether that's an email, whether you're a huge fan of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, choose one of those to do so you can help spread the word about this action and spur others to take part. So again, we're going to throw on some music for another minute or two and then move us along to the next section.
Asleep amid the flowers for a couple of hours on a beautiful day. Daydream, I dream of you amid the flowers for a couple of hours. Such a beautiful day.
Just give folks another second. I know the clicking a thing and making a post takes a little bit longer, so just give folks another opportunity to do that. There will be other similar actions coming up, so you can rotate which social media account you're coming from. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. Sorry, let me. So now that we've reviewed where New Yorker News stands on what any scoping plan must include, we're going to go review what the draft of the scoping plan currently says, because it was released last month. So first, we're going to have a brief presentation by New Yorker News member Shyok of 350 NYC, followed by a panel with members of the Climate Action Council, Peter Iwanowitz, and Climate Justice Working Group member Rawa Gramatsian. So please, Shyok, take it away and give us an overview of what the actual thing says.
Hi, this is Shyok. Thank you, Ryan, for introducing me. As you said, I'm from 350 Grassroots All Volunteer Climate Org, but right now I'm in the southern tier of New York, in rural Broome County, which is Onondaga land. So on October 14, there was a big meeting of the Climate Action Council, and a state staffer presented some scenarios, some pathways on how the state can achieve its net zero 2050 targets. And this was a 4-hour-long meeting, and I'll do my best to summarize it in the next 8 minutes. Next slide, please. So various scenarios, various pathways were presented. So as was said before, there are these various advisory panels that kind of advise the Climate Action Council. So over the last 1 year, these panels, they went away and came up with their own recommendations and presented them to the Climate Action Council. So when the state added those recommendations up, they came up with scenario 1. But that scenario was found to be lacking in reaching our climate goals. So the state staffers and the consultants, they went away and kind of strengthened those recommendations. Then that led them to come up with scenarios 2 and 3, which have small differences. The real difference with scenario 3 is that it's a little more aggressive in retiring fossil fuel infrastructure. It actually, in some places, retires working infrastructure. So that's the difference between 2 and 3, but it's generally minor. Next slide, please. So if there's one thing you take away from my presentation, it should be this slide. So the costs versus the benefits. So if you look on the left, that's where the costs and benefits of the 2 different scenarios have been laid out. So for scenario 2, you see the costs, the total costs of implementing the plan from 2020 to 2050. If you add up all the costs of building windmills, solar panels, insulating homes, everything, if you add them all up and reduce them to today's dollars, the cost is $340 billion. But the benefits are $420 billion. So there's a net $80 billion benefit from implementing the plan. And from scenario 3, the benefit is $150 billion because it's more aggressive with retiring fossil fuels. And where do these $420 billion benefit come from? You look over to the right, you see the big yellow section. Those are straight up climate havoc not happening benefits. So the benefit of not having floods, of not having hurricanes, that's what adds up to $260 billion. And we get $160 billion benefit from like just local straight up health benefits, the benefits of not having asthma, of not having heart attacks, and so on and so forth. So as activists, I feel it's really important for us to take this slide away back to our communities, back to our fellow voters, and back to our legislators. Next slide, please. So this is where I'll give you a sense of these scenarios that they came up with. So in the scenario 2, if you look on the left, it's talking about light duty vehicles, which are cars, SUVs, minivans. So the top left corner, the graph you have is a percentage of sales by time of the various kinds of vehicles. So if you look at 2030, you will see that they think that you should be only selling 10% of the market should be of gasoline vehicles, whereas 70% should be electric vehicles. But the interesting thing to look at is the graph below, which tells you the share of vehicles actually on the road And you see, it takes so long to actually get to that little sliver of 5% of gasoline vehicles. Our fossil fuel infrastructure has this huge inertia. It's really important to keep in mind. And over the right, we have things like trucks, buses, medium and heavy duty vehicles. What I'd like to point out there is the big dependence on hydrogen. And this hydrogen is not a technology that's yet mature. It's not yet at scale. So, but that's what they are kind of banking on and planning. Next slide, please. This is like a kind of a similar trajectory for building heating. As you see, natural gas should be retired pretty quickly, around 2030, thereabouts. Natural gas, again, it's the sales of natural gas equipment. It takes much longer, if you look on the right, to actually get natural gas out of our buildings. And what will natural gas be replaced by? It'll be replaced by electric heating, and not electric heating as we know today, but using heat pumps that extract heat from the air and from the ground to heat our homes and businesses. Next slide, please. So the real big transformation is this electrification of the economy, where we move away from burning fossil fuels into using electricity. I'll just skip this slide. Next slide, please. So this gives you a sense of the challenges with electricity. So we are looking at a so-called challenging week in the winter of 2050. And why challenging? Some winter weeks will be challenging because those are weeks when the sun is not that strong, when the wind is not blowing that hard, yet it's pretty cold, and we have a significant dependence on electricity to heat our homes. So I will not walk through this graph in great detail. I just want to point out to a few salient points. If you look at the bottom, that beige section, you see we have a significant dependence on nuclear, hydro, and bio, according to these scenarios. And all of these have some problem or the other. And another big thing to notice in this graph is this dark gray section on the top. And this is where they're calling for zero carbon firm capacity. Now, what is firm capacity in electric grid lingo? It is the kind of electricity source that you can just switch on at a flick of a switch. So today that's like diesel, natural gas. They think we will still need that kind of power, that kind of availability of power, but from a zero carbon source. And they envision that possibly being hydrogen, which again is not a mature and available technology. Next slide, please. Yeah, so overall, I would call this a fairly moderate plan. It has modest, like 10% thereabout increase in system costs of infrastructure and fuel, and a fairly small component of GDP. Next slide, please. So I would like to end by, again, going over the benefits, the huge health benefits of moving away from fossil fuels. So much of premature deaths avoided, so much of heart attacks, so much of ER visits due to asthma or pneumonia attacks, so many workdays not lost. These are huge benefits that we really need to talk about and take back to our communities. And next slide, please. And what's interesting is that I'm sorry, these benefits are statewide. They are not limited to upstate or downstate. If you look at the per capita health benefits, they are throughout the state. Upstate gets a lot of health benefits from moving away from burning wood, which has huge particulate matter pollution. Downstate, if you look at Long Island and Westchester, even wealthy communities have benefits. Why? Guess what? When you burn fossil fuels, the pollution doesn't stay there, it travels. So all communities benefit when we go away from burning fossil fuels. So that's really the message we need to take to our communities, to our legislators. That's all from me. Back to you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Shayog, who just condensed 4 hours of a presentation into 8 minutes. This is all very complicated, and it requires an incredible amount of very particular facets when we transition an entire economy to a new new sources of energy. And so, you know, this is why we hold events like this, is to distill the information, democratize it, and provide avenues to actually move and take action on all these moving pieces, as I know so many people here on the call are familiar with as they carry that nuance in their daily work. So with that, I'm really glad to introduce our kind of little panel here today that includes the decision makers and the actors in this process. So we have Climate Action Council member Peter Iwanowitz and Climate Justice Working Group member Rawa Gramatsian. And we're gonna kind of stop the slideshow and highlight our screens for discussion. And so I would also, you may have missed it in the chat, like to recognize that our good friend Raya Salter, who is also a member of the Climate Action Council, is here with us today as she waits to board a plane to COP26 in Glasgow, which is where the international climate change negotiations are currently taking place. So it's exciting and amazing as always to have her on. And with that, I'm first just going to call on Peter to introduce yourself and just very briefly supplement any information from Shyok's presentation as a member of the Climate Action Council.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Iwanowitz, member of the New York State Climate Action Council. I also have the pleasure of being the Executive Director of Environmental Advocates NY. And I learned something along the way as we were promoting the Environmental Rights Amendment that passed in this past election season, that a lot of people haven't met me in person, only on Zoom. So for those of you who are just listening in and haven't met me, my Zoom persona is a lot shorter than I am in real life. I'm 6'4". I'm male, I'm white complexion, and I have dark hair that's receding pretty quickly. But it's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. And I think along the way in the panel, we'll probably provide a little bit more context and some details about from Shyok's presentation, but I just want to give him a shout out. That was just amazing, beautiful, highly condensed and super focused. And I just wanted to really appreciate Shyok for running us through that 4-hour session in such fast order. You hit all the high points and we'll get into some more details.
Amazing, thanks, Peter. And Rawa, if you could please introduce yourself and share the role of the Climate Justice Working Group from your experience in the Climate Action Council, and tell us how it's been going so far.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. Excellent presentations in the lead up to this. My name's Rawa Gramatsian. I go by she, her pronouns. I am, of course, one of the members of the Climate Justice Working Group, and I'm also the executive director of Push Buffalo, located right here in Buffalo, New York, and I come from unceded Haudenosaunee territory. So I think that the initial sort of work scope or job of the Climate Justice Working Group was to come up and define the criteria for what is a disadvantaged community. And how will these funds be spent, the 40% that are supposed to be set aside of clean energy funds going to disadvantaged communities. So some of the things that we really advocated for and have made it into what that mapping is going to look like are things like historical inequities that caused us to many low income, in particular communities of color, communities that are hit first and worst, live closest to the pollution, and have had to deal with things like redlining. So redlining is actually a category that we use in defining what is a disadvantaged community. We do use issues around income and race, of course, but also vulnerability, who's close to the pollution, and will be also climate vulnerable during climate disruptions due to climate change. But I think another really important feature of the Climate Justice Working Group is that there are some really incredible members of it, members from NEJA, Eddie Bautista. We've got Elizabeth Jean-Pierre from Uprose in Brooklyn, Abigail Griff and the Finger Lakes and others that really, took our role seriously, but wanted to ensure that the cart didn't come before the horse, meaning as the other advisory groups and work and panels were working on recommendations, that we kind of interceded and organized and said, wait a minute, we need to actually take a look at them, and we need to give an evaluation from the Climate Justice Working Group's perspective as we're working on disadvantaged communities to ensure that the equity principles are in there. And so I think Peter can attest better than me, but we are working really, really hard to not just be disruptors, but really hold them accountable to what the bill's intentions originally are. And I think we've made some strides, and of course, we'll see when the final draft of the scoping plan comes out at the end of the year.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rawa. Already answered the first question around how has feedback from the Climate Justice Working Group influenced the draft scoping plan. The last Climate Action Council meeting was pretty consequential. It released that cost benefit analysis that showed that the most beneficial way to meet our goals is to not rely on false solutions. And it validates the price tag that we need $10 to $15 billion annually to make this transition, which, as we'll talk about later, we have a solution for. But there were some really key takeaways, including obviously the different scenario pathways, and those come with their own implications. So kind of just like, at this point of the process, what were your takeaways from the last meeting as it relates to meeting our goals, meeting the climate and equity mandates, and our progress in moving forward this climate law? So Peter or Rawa, whoever's feeling called to answer first.
Yeah, why don't I start? And then I just want to fully disclose, I happened to be on the road during the last Climate Action Council meeting, and don't tell anybody outside of this call, but Rawa allowed me to camp out and Push Buffalo's offices so I could adequately plug in and be an effective participant in that. So thank you very much again, Rawa, for the gracious space. So key takeaways from me, and I want to underscore some things that Shayak said earlier. I mean, first, right off the top, if you didn't look at Shayak's slides, as you blew through them really fast, climate forcing pollution and co-pollutants are really having a detrimental impact on our health. And I think you all know this, but they're making too many people sick. Too many people who get sick are dying prematurely. We know primarily those people who are getting sick and dying prematurely are Black and Brown communities, people who live in Black and Brown people who are living in these communities. And it's a real big problem. I always flip it around. Everybody talks about cost benefit. I always talk about benefit costs, because benefits have always been bigger than the costs. And they far outweigh the cost of compliance and reducing this. And when we talk about benefits, I mean, these are our loved ones. These are people in our community that are getting sick and dying prematurely. And I really just can't stress enough that I think finally the council and people who've been paying attention to it are getting a really understanding of the human toll. I think some of our elected officials are really understanding this human toll as we see these more extreme weather events that we've all said we're going to start happening with more frequency happening. And it just really underscores for me another key takeaway is what's going on. The need is great. We need $10 to $15 billion per year to fund the just transition, and to do it right, we need that amount of resource. And so far, that's been not a key piece of discussion as a council. I think that's going to change very soon, and we're going to see stuff in the scoping plan that will talk about how we pay for all these things that have to happen, and how fast we need to start paying for them. And I think there's going to be huge opportunities for Envirenews and advocates to push that vision of how we pay for it. And a subtlety in Shayak's overview here is, but it's really, really important, is we win more as a state. Fewer people die prematurely. Fewer people get sick. If we get to full electrification, if we bypass these false solutions, it's pretty clear from the state's presentation. And it's pretty clear that they've been allowed to make these presentations since the change of administrations, and really lean into the things and the limited role, if any, benefit you would get from things like biofuels. But the faster we move to full electrification across all of our sectors and economy, the less people get sick and die prematurely, and the faster our economy wins. Those for me are all the key takeaways, but I have to just underscore the human impact of climate change was really forcefully laid out by the NYSERDA staff, and I don't want to get lost tonight. That's a really big important point. Your takeaways, Raya. Rawa, sorry.
Oh, well, it's okay. Well, first of all, Peter graced us in Buffalo, and for that amazing win that was just had on Tuesday, making clean air and water a human right. Like, wow. So congratulations, but that's what they were in Buffalo for, and he got to post in my office, which is great, which is severely underutilized due to COVID. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways, what was really affirming about the modeling that the state did is that low income communities of color for the last 20 years have
Did we get a Rawa freeze?
first. Did I freeze?
Just for a second.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, I was going to say it's really affirming for Black and Brown communities that have been shouting, for anybody to pay attention to them because we knew what was happening to us in our communities, that modeling really shows who's being impacted right now. I think the other affirmation that we got is we have to find new revenue streams to pay for the transition to a renewable clean energy. And it is, I think, frontline communities, but also New York Renews and the coalition that's been built with hundreds and thousands of people across New York State, is that the polluters that got us here, that have been, killing our communities, really need to step up and help us be part of the transition and help us pay for the harms that they've caused. When we see what the storm that caused New York City and all of those deaths that were just unnecessary, I think that the state is certainly paying attention. We did actually have NYSERDA come to Buffalo so we can show them what we mean by a just transition, that even though we may be poor, that we actually are the most impacted and have the best solutions. And they got to see some of those solutions. And when we talk about the 40% set aside, how do they need to work in order for communities, especially low-income communities, to actually access the resources? Don't put too many barriers on them. Actually remove some of those barriers. Allow us to make the transition that we need to in our blocks, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, because that's the only way that we're actually going to be able to transition and not leave anybody behind. So I hope that's finally getting out there and that we can't keep doing the same old things, hoping for a different outcome.
Thanks, Rawa. I think the next question is getting a little bit into what you just said, is where we're going to ask a couple more questions here and then open it up for a few questions from the chat. Is what are your hopes and fears for the next phase in the scoping plan process? We'll share a little bit in a few minutes around what is until the end of the year, and then what can we expect next year. But from your vantage point, really in the thick of it, what are your hopes and fears? So either Rawa or Peter to kick us off.
Rawa, please go.
My hope is, I think that we need to stop talking about or making the case for what the solutions are. We have so many studies. New York News has done studies. Every organization I know has done studies. We are now living in a world that is a changing climate. It's no longer in front of us. We're actually living it. And that every year that we wait, it's going to get worse. So my hope is that we stop talking about it and begin to implement these strategies. And that really, as new folks are elected, I think that's always my big worry, that it's going to cause us to take several steps back that we can no longer afford. I hope that we're all going to be voting in a way that actually puts the right people in place that are not going to deny it, but actually will have the level of courage and boldness to implement these strategies as quickly as humanly possible.
Any fears?
Or
they go along with your hopes?
Well, my fear is, our elected officials just are going to continue to have their heads in the sand and try to do the politically expedient thing when that's not what we need. That is not the kind of leadership we need.
Excellent. So my hopes are very similar to Rawa's. My hope is that when people see the draft plan, they will run to legislators because legislators, what do they like to do, right? They like to legislate. If there are things that we can move faster on, and they can start legislating on to drive, statutory change faster. I hope people see this and run screaming to the legislature saying, pass this law, do this, incentivize this, get moving. Rawa is absolutely right. We don't have a minute to waste. People are getting sick and dying as we're talking. And really stress upon them. They just did it last session, right? They moved legislation that essentially puts an expiration date on internal combustion engines for passenger vehicles, trucks, and buses. Leaf blowers now have an expiration date because of new laws that spun out of discussions that were already happening. So my hope is that people will see this stuff and move and get it going faster. We have six months of legislative session before they're up for re-election in the state legislature and the governor and the statewide races. That's my hope, is that people really start to run with this stuff and push it faster. My fear with the plan is over-reliance on the panel recommendations. I think the Climate Justice Working Group did an amazing job of helping the council understand the shortfalls of those panel recommendations and how the equity frame wasn't being met by them. They gave us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Quite frankly, I want to see a completely revamped transportation one. You guys sent them back to the drawing board. I want to see a better transportation plan out of this. My fear is too much of the draft will be based on what the panelists said or the panel recommendations were. That's a shortcoming. So those are my short hopes and fears.
Well, thank you both. We're gonna take a couple of questions from the chat in a moment. Just wanted to ask real quickly from both of your perspectives. So, we've provided some tools. We're gonna provide a bunch more tools. We've done a lot of organizing around the implementation process. So when advocates use the advocacy tools we provide at New Yorker News, where do they pop up? Do they make a difference?
Pick me.
As the
Here's where they
receiver,
pop up. Here's where they're popping up. I'm not multitasking here. So Ryan asked me to go through and read all the names that are hit my email box tonight, but I'm not going to do them all because there's so many. I'm so gratified to see this. But a quick shout out to Carl Blumenthal, Ann Erling, Amy Faust, Bob Cohen, Carrie Campbell, Donna Goodwin, Ellie. These messages are already getting through to me as a member of the Climate Action Council. And what it tells me, and hopefully my fellow council members, is somewhere in the Twitterverse, the internet, there's education going on. This isn't happening by happenstance. Somebody is educating. And now as a council member, I know that information is being imparted and people are being asked to take action, and there are citizens of the state that are engaged in taking action. So if you want to know where they show up in my email box and the other 21 members of the Climate Action Council. And some of them will get annoyed with their email inbox being, hit tonight. But for me, that's just gratifying to understand that education's going on and activism is spinning out of it. Keep doing the educating and advocating. Sand in the gears and holding us accountable is tried and true tactics and strategies that work. They get attended to.
Anything to add, Rawa? Okay. So we have a few questions from the chat. Sarah Gronum asked, what is the outreach to journalists who are a key conduit to explain this to New Yorkers who are not part of the climate movement? That's more of a question that me and Ariel had a back and forth about that we can just answer. One, there's some journalists on this call, which is great. Welcome, hello. And Ariel is about to drop a letter to the editor toolkit into the chat that folks can utilize to be responsive to things. And the great things about letters to the editor is that you can kind of pivot to whatever you want. There could be something on storm impacts, on utility rates, around pollution, around beaches and oceans, that you can always pivot to what you want to message on. So our letter to the editor toolkit gives a great kind of run through about how you can do that. And so I think that's a quick answer. Peter and Rawa, you are of course welcome to chime in there. How do we engage other journalists who are not following this stuff? But otherwise, I will move to another question. Great. So Francesca asks, how is the CLCPA action plan going to also bring in low-income rural communities in New York State, so we can build a broad-based coalition across partisan lines and begin to erode the power of those parties, GOP and corporate Dems, to sink our goals?
Peter, you want to take that one on?
I was going to ask you, because I know that Climate Justice Working Group is looking at broad array of metrics about disadvantaged communities and a broader understanding of sort of how we're going to help all people. So start there and I'll jump in.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And of course, the one beautiful thing is that the Climate Justice Working Group actually has a very broad group of representatives, including many parts of rural New York. And, you know, of course, not like just like one urban community is not like another urban community. Same thing with rural communities. One of the things that we are certainly advocating for is once the DACs or disadvantaged communities criteria comes out, the scoping plan comes out, that there really should be some kind of an advisory body, maybe looking at the 10 regional districts that are already set out, economic districts in New York State, where the people that are of and from those communities get to actually do more of the ground truth thing. For example, the implementation strategies that this community is designing around the equity standards, is it actually holding true? Are they meeting the goals of the people that most need it? Or is it going to kind of, again, the more affluent people that don't really need these investments or can pay for them themselves? So I think that kind of body is going to be critical, because I think it will be ultimately too difficult just for the CAC to kind of, you know, be a watchdog around that. Because, you know, once we were doing the mapping around what is the disadvantaged community, we went down to the streets and I was like, no, that is not a disadvantaged community, but that one is. So we ended up having to really play around with the tool, which, you know, it's not enough. It's not robust enough yet, but I think over time will continue to be. But that is only if the people that are actually on the ground are informing that process. And so we need mechanisms that allow us to do that.
Anything to add, Peter?
No, of course not. That was just eloquent and beautiful. So no.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question. Minta Santos asks, what are the incentives that can be used to urge officials to want to use more sustainable energy, especially because fossil fuels are so inexpensive, which recently has very much not been the case. But you know, the kind of fluctuating prices, I think, is one thing. As put my moderator hat off for a second and offer a thought. But Rawa or Peter?
Yeah, I'll sort of start here. I mean, I think the incentive for politicians to want to act on this stuff and officials to want to act is, you know, let's just have an honest conversation about, you know, the tremendous human toll of combusting of fuels and what it causes, you know, whether it is, you know, the combustion of wood as a heating source in upstate communities. It's dirtier than burning coal when you look at particulate matter emissions. And it's so across the spectrum of combusting fossil fuels is the human toll. The other piece of it is combusting fossil fuels is inherently wasteful. People don't really think about this too much, but when you burn gasoline in an internal combustion engine, you're only getting about 30% of the value of every dollar of gasoline you put into that, you know, car. So, you know, if they started to get honest and real, the incentive for policymakers is to stop shipping all of our economic resource out of state to out-of-state fossil fuel companies. I mean, NYSERDA laid out sort of like the tens of billions of dollars we spend on petroleum every year. You know, 85% of it goes out of state. It's foolish. It's economically foolish to be sort of continuing down this pathway. You know, I know that's difficult for them to take on entrenched interests like the fossil fuel company, but if they truly understood and heard from constituents that they want a less wasteful, more healthful, more prosperous and climate safe energy world, they wouldn't have that incentive to start acting and ensuring that state budget dollars are no longer going to prop up the fossil fuel industry. So we get rid of subsidies for fossil fuel combustion in New York State. And we use those resources to be put into the just transition now. There's things they can do now to move us away from that stuff to help cut our waste and allow us to afford the technologies for full electrification. I'll add something I added in the chat. That same provision of the climate law that led to the demise of those gas-fired power plants, that applies to the division of budget. And people should be demanding that the Hochul administration presents a budget in January that is consistent from an equity as well as a climate frame with the law. The division of budget is captured by that section of law. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. It was written that way with full intention so that we would have budgets that were aligned with these goals rather than being contradictory. So if we see stuff in the budget that is in conflict with that, if we see stuff that is not upholding the prioritization of co-pollutant reductions in communities, we yell about it. We make an issue about it. She wants to be a re-elected governor. The Hochul administration has to be accountable for a budget that meets the climate goals and the equity goals of the law. If it doesn't, let's call it out and take those monies and put them into just transition the way we need to.
And the only other thing I will add to that is it is really important that it is up to us as individuals to reach out to all of our elected officials. So your representatives, like you need to be calling them, doing direct actions with them. They will listen to you. I think that we need to stop being scared and the fear tactics that they used about, ooh, it's going to cost this much money. How much money does it cost us every time we have a superstorm? I mean, literally, I mean, look at how many billions of dollars after Sandy, the last storm that we just had, so on and so forth, when really we should be using those investments to transition out of the, like the fossil fuels, right? The pollution, all the things that are causing the harm. So let's just address it at the root cause. But I really think that what has made New York Renews powerful and actually got the CLCPA to pass in New York State is everyday New Yorkers. And we're actually calling on you even more now to organize around your communities and hold the elected officials accountable. And if they are not going to listen to you, maybe it's time to vote them out.
Thank you both so much. With that, we're going to transition into our next piece. Really want to thank you, Peter and Rawa, not only for your time here today, but like the hundreds of hours that you have put in to the Climate Action Council process alone, let alone the decades of work that have preceded your time to get on those bodies. So thank you again so much. Zasu, if you don't mind, bringing back up the presentation.
Thank you, Ryan.
As Zasu is bringing up the slides, I think it's been put into the chat a few times, but Ariel has put in the Climate Action Council website where you can see all the upcoming meetings and the materials that they put out. They don't give you the 8-minute condenser, but they are available for view. And so the last thing I just want, we want to point out here is that, like, here we are in early November, the Climate Action Council is starting to give feedback on the scoping plan that was presented by, other actors within the Climate Action Council. There's then going to be another meeting on November 30th. All of the Climate Action Council meetings are public. You're able to attend. It's not very participatory, and that's why we try to create spaces like this. We have a little project called the People's Climate Action Council that a lot of the folks who helped organize this are a part of here at New Yorker News. So then in early December, they're going to do a revised draft scoping plan to the members. And then by the end of the year, they're going to discuss some of the changes to be made. And then the really important part is next year, beginning in 2022, it is legally required there are at least 6 public hearings across New York State to provide comment and feedback on the draft scoping plan. And this is a crucial moment for community and grassroots input, for holding the line on bottom lines, fighting false solutions, and having tangible events to mobilize around. There are no set dates for those or locations, but as we said at the beginning of this call, this is just a re-invitation to commitment to this work, and we have a lot more to do. So, as we noted, the state has recognized the costs and benefits of this transition, something our coalition partners have been clear about since we came together. Our policy plank has already included always included 2 steps. 1, get aggressive emission reduction and equity mandates into law. And 2, hold corporate polluters accountable to raise the revenue needed to fund the transition. So in our next section, which will include several calls to action, we'll discuss our upcoming work to continue the fight for the equitable implementation of our climate law, which includes passing our robust funding mechanism, the Climate and Community Investment Act. Off to you, Zasu.
Thank you, Ryan. And also, I just want to say thank you, Rawa and Peter, for that extremely informative and motivating panel. So hi, everyone. My name is Zazu Scott. I use she, they pronouns. I'm with New York News, and I'm tuning in today from unceded Cayuga land in Ithaca, New York. So as Ryan touched on, we're going to shift gears, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the missing pieces in New York's climate law and a bill that we're fighting for to fill in the gaps. And I'm also going to talk about how we're mobilizing to win in the upcoming legislative session. So we've talked a lot about implementing the CLCPA, and as we've discussed, the CLCPA sets historic goals for emissions reductions and climate justice. But if we're really serious about reaching the CLCPA's goals, we need money to do it. And we really need a dedicated funding source. And that's just something that the CLCPA on its own, it doesn't provide. So that's why New York Renews' 300 plus orgs are fighting for another bill, the Climate and Community Investment Act, shorthand the CCIA. So the CCIA would raise $15 billion annually by making corporate polluters pay for every ton of pollution that they emit. And we need to pass the CCIA first to put our money where our mouths are when it comes to climate justice, but also to fully implement New York's climate law that we've been talking so much about today. So I'm just going to take some time to talk a little bit more about the mechanics of the CCIA. So first things first, the CCIA is about getting the money that we need. And the CCIA generates revenue by making polluters pay. And importantly, it places a special penalty on pollutants that harm human health. And the $15 billion per year would be invested in 4 programs, and it would fund good green jobs, frontline communities, the infrastructure that frontline communities need, and a renewable economy for New York State. None of the money would be invested in police, prison, or related infrastructure, and formerly incarcerated people would be prioritized for the jobs the CCIA would create. So last legislative session, New York Renews and the 300 orgs within the coalition really put on an unprecedented grassroots campaign for the CCIA. But the legislature and the governor failed to act and failed to move the bill forward. And common wisdom is that it takes 3 or 4 years to pass a bill. And while we're trying to shift that paradigm, we know that the work that we did last session is a critical building block for the campaign that we're going to launch this legislative session to try to pass the CCIA in the budget. And so, like I just said, we're really going to fight for the CCIA in the New York State budget process, which will begin in January when legislative session starts. And we enter this budget fight with some of the accomplishments that we earned last session. So we have 29 Senate co-sponsors, 54 assembly sponsors. We have recognition from some of our elected leaders, including an acknowledgement from the Senate Majority Leader on the need to fund New York's climate law. And most importantly, we have a growing and emboldened grassroots base across New York State that threw down last legislative session and that will stand up again for the climate investments that our communities need. So, if we want this campaign to be successful, we really need all hands on deck. And so we're just going to spend the rest of the call talking about what you can do right now in the next weeks, but also in the next few minutes to make your voice heard for the CCIA, climate action, and climate justice in general. So now I'm going to pass it to my friend Sam to talk some more about our upcoming actions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Poole, a sophomore at Columbia Secondary School and a youth climate activist with New York News. I'm here today to talk about the lobby visits for the Climate and Community Investment Act, or CCIA. As Zasu said, we're in a critical moment in terms of CCIA in New York State, with the budget season just around the corner. This is the time where we must act to build momentum and support and ensure that whatever happens, CCIA funding is in the budget. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act set out the goals, but those goals mean nothing without the funds to make them a reality. That's why we need you. This effort can only succeed if activists from across New York State add their voices to tell their representatives the climate emergency won't wait while they play political games, and neither will we. That's why we're organizing a grassroots lobby effort where constituents like you can meet with your representatives directly and tell them that the CCIA and climate are a priority for you. We have over 40 plus grassroots lobby visits scheduled, and we need you to join. If you've never lobbied before, each visit will be organized by someone with experience. We'll be able to provide you info and support. We are dropping the link in the chat now to sign up for lobby visits near you, along with the social media kit. So please sign up for a visit with your rep and go ahead and post, tweet, email, and share to get everyone excited, because we're ready for round 2 and we're gonna win. If you have any questions as to how to get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out to our lobby team leads, amazing Nan Fessler and Alan Blair. Now we're gonna talk about the November mobilizations. The exciting kickoff to our CCIA budget battle. 3 large demonstrations across the state in Albany, New York City, and Rochester will start us off strong and help build momentum for the work ahead. Not only that, this show of power will help set the agenda for the budget process, and we need as many people as possible to make sure that our voices are heard by Governor Hochul and legislative leadership. There's no doubt the fossil fuel interests will be spreading propaganda and trying to obscure the true cost of climate change for our communities at every step of the way. But we're ready. We'll be there, and our voices will be stronger. Now Zasu is going to pass it off to the leaders of the actions, who will tell us a bit more about their specific plans. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. So we're going to hear from the organizers of the New York City, Albany, and Rochester mobilizations coming up on November 13th. And we're going to hear first from Sharon, who is leading in New York City.
Hey everyone, my name's Sharon Serra Rincon. I'm the climate justice organizer at UPROSE. UPROSE is an intergenerational, multiracial, and nationally recognized Black and Indigenous women of color led organization working at the intersection of climate change and racial justice, and a member of New Yorker News. On November 13th, we'll be gathering at Times Square at noon and marching to Governor Hochul's Manhattan office. This is the first frontline response taken to show the governor our resolve. Participants will be wearing Black, they're gonna have drums, they're gonna have noisemakers. The New York Mechanical Orchestra is gonna be there and bring even more energy and power to this event. At the governor's office, we're gonna spread out and take over the street where we will lay out blue fabric representing flooding and rising seas and then walk off. It also importantly represents the disproportionate climate impact on historically marginalized communities, because those least responsible for climate change are the most impacted. We're going to be joined in the action by elected officials and frontline community leaders such as Jasmine Robinson, Elizabeth Jean-Pierre, Monique Fitzgerald, and others at a press conference outside of the governor's office. We expect hundreds and hundreds of people to turn out, so you can only imagine how powerful this action is going to be. This is an event you do not want to miss. Climate change is here, and we need the governor to hear our message loud and clear. If you're in New York City, come out and show solidarity with us. There's a social media toolkit to share this with your friends and family, and an RSVP link in the chat for y'all to fill out, because we want to know how many pops to bring. And with that, I'm passing it over to Gabriel, who is an organizer for the Albany Action.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Sounds like y'all have a really awesome event planned out. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel. I'm the lead organizer for Citizen Action in the Capital District. We're a multi-issue statewide grassroots organization that looks to build grassroots power so we can win legislation that will make this world fairer and more equitable for everybody. We're super excited about this action. We've had a big group of, a big coalition of local groups, including environmental, labor, faith, youth, and other community allies involved in the planning process. We're going to be meeting at West Capitol Park at 11:45, so we can get the rally started right at 12 p.m. So we can hear from some legislators and community members, representatives from different orgs, so we can look at the intersections between climate and faith and labor and the youth and all these other aspects. And then we're going to be marching to the governor's mansion for a quick die-in. So the registration link is in the chat, and as is our toolkit. So if you can, please, please, please take a second, copy and paste a social media post from that toolkit onto your social media post, so we can help make sure that we can reach our goal of 100 plus people. And last but not least, huge shout out to Zazu Scott and Amanda Sachs for their huge help in this rally. Now I'm passing it over to John. Thank you.
Hi, I'm in Rochester, and I am a member of the Climate Solutions Accelerator, our local group here in Rochester. We are inviting you to come to our rally on November 13th at noon at Parcel 5 in the city. It's in front of one of our senators who initially sponsored the CCIA, but then pulled his name off. We want to push him to get his name back on there as a co-sponsor. Our rally will feature 4 legislators, including Kim Smith of Vocal, who was just elected to our city council. We'll have youth speakers, and we'll have our local Climate Solutions Accelerator executive, who is a member of the Climate Justice Working Group. We don't have an office of the governor in our town, so we're going to then walk over to Chase Bank and complain about them being the largest funder of gas and oil extraction in the US, and try to get them to change their behavior. The link is in the chat. Hope you can all attend. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Sharon, Gabe, and John. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm feeling really energized and motivated to see what we put together on November 13th. So we just went over a lot. We talked about our grassroots lobby effort. We talked about the 3 large mobilizations happening. And we also talked about the way that you can plug into those. We talked about our sign-up pages and our outreach toolkits. And we know that there's a lot of information, there's a lot of links. And so what we're going to do right now is we're just going to take 4 or 5 minutes to give everyone a moment to take action right now. So we're going to reshare some of the links that just came up, and we're going to add some new ones. So we're also going to share a very quick and easy 1-minute tool that you can use to email, and then another one to call the governor and express your support for the CCIA. And then we're also going to reshare the links that you can use to register and share on socials, both the lobby visits and each one of these mobilizations. So I am going to transition from slides into sharing some music, and we will all go into dispersed action, and we'll come back in and share out in the chat what it is that we each did. So I will see you all soon, and I will let the tunes flow. Please enjoy your action taking.
Nobody move, there's blood on the floor. And I can't find my heart. Where did it go? Did I leave it in the cold? So please give it back, 'cause it's not yours to take. It must have fell when I lost my mind. Deep in the cup, drowning in pain. Somebody help, 'cause I can't find my way. Nobody move, nobody move. Ooh. been so long, I don't think I can hold on. Where were you when I needed you the most? Now I'm sitting here with the black hole in my chest. A heartless, broken mess.
Right, we're gonna come back in just 30 seconds. All right. Thank you all for taking action. If you took an action, drop.
I'd like to taste a real Italian coffee, please. What is the real Italian coffee?
Espresso.
Cappuccino. You mean black coffee?
In a capsule? Yes, Lavazza Classico.
All right.
Thanks, YouTube.
All right. Sorry for any confusion there. Moving back in, I see lots of emails. People signed up for rallies. Someone called the governor. I see some fun emojis. Yes, YouTube spreading climate disinformation and coffee ads. What a vibe. Laura called the governor. Nick emailed the governor. Catherine texted her friends. Sam tweeted. Paul registered for the New York City rally. Another tweet. Julia emailed the governor. I'm just getting chills now. I love feeling our collective energy and knowing that we all together are sending all of this out into the universe right now. John also called the governor. Brian emailed. Amazing. All right. Thank you all for taking action. Both the little actions that we take by posting, texting our friends add up. And we hope to see you at some of our bigger events. We hope to see you at a live lobby meeting and at a mobilization on November 13th. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my friend and role model, Nan, to talk a little bit about the sustained energy that we need going forward.
Yeah, whose law? Our law. I mean, the word accountability. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm so excited about all the actions that we're doing. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nan Fessler, she, her, with Indivisible Harlem, live in Central Harlem on unceded Lenape land. But yes, you know, I've heard the word accountability so many times this evening, and it's so true. Our role for all of us on this call is to be the eyes and ears of our collective community and hold the Climate Action Council, the various state agencies, especially the Department of Environmental Conservation, you know, our state legislators, the governor, the whole apparatus, the state apparatus, we've got to hold accountable. We need to be the watchdog for possible CLCPA violations. A very loud no to any false solutions. I mean, we heard from Shyok and then Peter and Rawa about that amazing NYSERDA cost-benefit analysis that actually says that if we get to our CLCPA goals faster, if we don't traffic in false solutions. And the faster that we get to those goals, the better our collective health outcomes. Now, we've shown up at rallies around the state. People have said it earlier tonight, from Newburgh to Astoria, to protest fossil fuel infrastructure. And that's how we've actually been able to win. We've got more wins that we have to make sure we achieve, like making sure we shut down the North Brooklyn pipeline. And we also need to keep an eagle eye on the New York State Assembly. Earlier, they held a public hearing on CLCPA implementation. They took on this responsibility, and now it's our responsibility to hold the Assembly accountable to ensure that Section 7 of the CLCPA, it sounds a little nerdy to be talking about Section 7, but I think Peter addressed it earlier. It really is the section that talks about climate and equity screens. We need this applied to every decision made in all of the state agencies. And as Peter had said, even the Department of Budget. Everything from launching new programs to issuing permits. So our eyes are, as I said, on everything within the state apparatus. And our eyes are even watching Speaker Heastie. And I want to just end by saying, from our eyes, though, to our voices need to be heard in those lobby visits that Sam talked about and in the streets, whether you're in New York, Albany, Rochester, parts of Western New York. I hope to see all of my friends and all of you who are in New York City on November 13th. Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you so much. This has been a information and action-packed evening. Tonight, we reviewed the content of our climate law, the latest on how it's actually coming together, and what still needs to be done in order to ensure a just transition here in New York State. While the work ahead of us is long and sometimes daunting, we have created the foundations for transformational change by building a diverse, broad-based coalition centered around equity in combating the climate crisis. We have demands and play an essential role in holding decision makers accountable. We are moving in a positive direction in terms of moving toward an equitable and effective path toward the climate law's mandates. We will need to be vigilant, especially over the next year, as we talked about the public hearings next year. We want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight and throughout the years, for taking action with us in real time and to committing to further actions ahead. Thank you to all the incredible people who helped put this event together across the New Yorker News Coalition, members of the organizing, policy, youth, and lobby committee. We will be following up shortly with all of the links that we shared in a recording. We had over 500 people registered. And so everyone who was not able to make it tonight will be able to continue to help support. So share those links when you get them, share the recording for folks who are not able to attend. And with that, we're gonna just cue some music and people can start making their way out. Thank you for being with us. Have a great rest of your night and we'll keep the fight going. Thanks everyone.